Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are discussing The Mandalorian, Season 2, Episode 6, The Tragedy. All that and more with Riki Hayashi and Paul Hoppe. Right after this commercial break, we have no control over. Welcome back. As I said, I'm Matthew. I'm joined today by two people who have both been regular co-hosts on this and my other podcast, but have not gotten to be together. So I'm really excited to have the three of us talk about what was not a boring episode. Quite a lot happened. So, Riki, Paul, how are you guys doing today?
Well, I'll go first. I'm having a good evening. I was just doing some research for some other Star Wars stuff, and I'm excited to be here talking about The Mandalorian.
Awesome.
Me too. I'm excited to, first of all, to be on the episode with Riki. Second of all, to talk about this episode directed by my favorite action director. I think since I've ever had a favorite action director, Robert Rodriguez.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think I have a favorite necessarily, but I've certainly loved a lot of his stuff. And Paul, actually, we had a quick discussion about whether letting someone know the director of an episode is a spoiler.
Yes, we did.
So why were you so excited at the end of this episode to see that he directed it?
Because, so the episode's basically 27 minutes in terms of actual content, right? I think the runtime's 33 minutes, but there's the lead-in. It's very short, right? I actually have a lot to say about the length, and I like the length of this episode and the Mandalorian episodes in general. I think there's good reason for it, but the whole episode felt like, at points contrived, set up for like the best set piece and action that they've done in the series, to me. And then at the end, it's like directed by Robert Rodriguez, and I'm like, of course it's directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Okay.
And just to fill folks in, what else has he done that people have probably seen?
Hang on. Here's the test.
Go ahead.
Before we go down the list, do you prefer, these are two of his movies, but do you prefer Desperado or El Mariachi?
Desperado. I haven't seen El Mariachi as many times as I would like. For a while it was on like Crackle or something, but I never owned it. I owned Desperado, I think, in like multiple formats. That was the movie I saw first, and then went back and saw El Mariachi. El Mariachi is the more impressive achievement, right? He did it on it was like a 5K or 7K budget or something, and it grossed like $2 million, and he's such an efficient director, I think, because he grew up with like not enough money to buy a ton of film. So he's just this unique filmmaker who started off shooting everything, like holding the camera, right? Doing all the writing, the choreography, the editing, even scoring some of his own films. So here, I don't think he did the writing or the editing or the cinematography, so he was basically just directing. But I just really like his approach. I think it's always innovative. It's very creative. Everything is, like this episode, everything's bright. There's a ton of action, but you can always see what's going on. And I'd say my biggest critique of modern action is that a lot of times it feels like they're just trying to kind of evoke an emotion and be like, yeah, there's stuff going on and it's fast and exciting. But it's like, you're looking at it like, I don't actually understand physically what these people are doing. And with Robert Rodriguez, I always feel like I have a very clear idea of physically what is happening in the action.
So he also did one of the Planet Terror features, right? With Quentin Tarantino. Which half did he do?
Trying to remember.
It's Grindhouse.
Grindhouse, right?
Yeah.
He did the one with the machine gun leg.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. The zombie part.
Yeah. And then he did one of the scenes in Four Rooms. From Dusk Till Dawn, to me, is like the ultimate Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino team up, where the first half of the movie just feels like a weird Tarantino film, and then the second half is just like a Robert Rodriguez vampire action movie.
With Selma Hayek dancing with a snake as the transition between the two. Pretty
exactly.
much.
Yes.
The movie just changes
that moment stuck out in your mind.
Well, to me, that's the transition between the two.
It is.
But yeah, I think you make some great points there. For me, especially, I liked how bright it was compared to last episode, where I I agree with you. I can't stand a lot of the time like Batman vs Superman does a ton of this. It's all very dark, and you're seeing the punches, and you get the feeling of it, but you don't really know what's going on.
Right.
And last episode, I think, is one of the best examples of when that can be really good, where you don't quite know what's going on because you're trying to understand the sense of utter terror that Ahsoka is invoking by being so badass.
Yeah. Although I would say, actually, in that episode, I had a pretty clear sense of what was going on, which is rare for something that's lit in that kind of darker fashion.
That's also fair. But yeah, it was a really nice change in this one. So
the action sequences in this movie really evoked a sense of war movies for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To the point where, the stormtroopers, usually we revel in the incompetence of them, their inability to hit things.
Right.
But in this case, we got to see their incompetence and just strategy. Like, they were just very bad.
Yeah. And the whole idea of, like, landing one group of them and then the second group of them.
I said that. I was like, why is the second ship so far behind?
Exactly. Like the first group got there and it felt like they were like 4 to 10. And then they just kept coming out of the thing. And I'm like, they just keep coming in waves. And then the second one came and I'm like, oh no. But then I'm like, wait, why didn't they all come at the same time?
There was one moment that I thought just perfectly captured this, where one of the commanders, it seemed like there was a couple of like squad commanders, is saying to one of his other people, like, go flank them.
Right.
And the guy's saying in protest, no, I can't do that. There's too much fire. He's like, no, just go, you'll be fine. And the guy stands up to go and is immediately shot dead.
Immediately.
Too much fire from one individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was also the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and so let's talk...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it was very much kind of the Desperado theme of, like, one person with a gun being able to shoot, like, 20 people. It also reminded me a little bit of the, like, extended Fellowship of the Ring scene where Legolas just, like, shoots, like, 20 orcs or, like, 10 in a row with his, and then Ming-Na Wen also had a shot where she's running and then she's jumping backwards and shooting people, which was, like, straight out of Desperado. Right after she did the boulder thing that was straight out of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
By the way, if anyone doesn't know the movie we're talking about, Desperado, definitely go see it. One of the first ever episodes of Superhero Ethics, Paul and I did about that, and we basically decided that mariachi gunslinging is basically a superpower in that movie.
Clearly.
That's why we did
it's amazing. Like, El Mariachi is also good, but it's, like you said, it's low budget and doesn't have, like, the big explosions and stuff. Yeah, the jumping off of the roof that's exploding while shooting someone. Yeah, that's... Wow.
So good.
Can't believe I missed that.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the things that people are really talking about is not only that we had this great action scene, but we had two pretty important characters come back, or in one case, really show up for the first time, except for one technical appearance.
Come back 37 years later, basically.
Yeah.
Boba Fett?
For
Boba Fett?
5 seconds.
Where?
Well, so which one do we want to talk about? Because I know we had Paul, you've been talking a lot about Ming-Na Wen not being around until now. But obviously, let's go with her first, actually. Paul, you've complained that she was so underused. What did you think of the way we finally got her back?
I liked it. So first of all, first just a moment with spoilers. The very first shot of the recap being Boba Fett like poking her. It's like, okay, I guess they're both showing up in this episode and she's not dead. Which I know you had constantly, you and Jeff, I remember being like, oh, I think she's going to come back. And I don't know whether there was any casting thing that you'd heard about, but I find it really weird that, like, I didn't know Robert Rodriguez was directing this episode. I didn't know that Ming-Na Wen was going to be in this season, partially because I'd looked at her IMDb page and there was only the credit from season 1. And often credits will kind of get leaked ahead of time, right?
Right.
So, and then I know Paul Sun-Hyung Kim also, like, didn't tell anyone until his episode aired, which was kind of awesome. Like, someone was like, oh, I think I saw Appa. And he's like, that was me. And, you know, so I think they've, like, got their casting and things like this kind of under wraps. It's possible that I'm just, like, super not tuned into stuff because I try not to be. But it's just weird to me that it's like, it feels like there aren't all these spoilers out in media ahead of time, but then it's like the tragedy, the Jedi. Like, here's a pre-roll that's like everything that's going to happen in this episode.
The episode titles do feel a bit spoilery. For sure.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess something bad's going to happen.
The episode titles are bad with Mandalorian. The pre-roll this is a complaint I have about a lot of shows these days.
Yeah, me too.
Where, a character who you haven't cared about for 3 seasons or 10 episodes all of a sudden shows up in the pre-roll. It loses any of the surprise factor of them coming back.
Right.
But yeah, I had not heard anything about Ming-Na Wen coming back. Her character's Fennec. It was mostly just that I remember there's that scene at the end of her appearance in season 1, I think in episode 5, possibly 6. I'm bad with the numbers.
It was 5.
5, yeah. Where we see someone coming up to her body. And I think that, for me, more than anything else, that was why I thought she was going to come back in season 2 at some point.
Yeah.
Also because she's such a great actress with such a great pedigree that the fact that she hadn't gotten to do much in that episode felt like, of course they're going to bring her back.
Right. It felt like a waste.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I had no idea she was coming back this episode. I loved it.
So yeah, her pedigree, she was also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right?
Mm-hmm.
As a recurring character.
Agent May. Yeah, she was one of the stars of that.
And Street Fighter, the movie.
Oh yeah, Chun-Li, of course.
I think she was Chun-Li, right?
And she was in Mulan, the original animated Mulan.
That's right.
Right.
As the title character.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't she in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? Or am I thinking of Michelle Yeoh?
I think that was Michelle Yeoh, because that was a long time ago.
That's true.
Although, I mean, Ming-Na Wen was active then as an actress, but I don't think she was in the movie.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly possible.
And you mentioned her character. The character name is Fennec, and her last name is Shand, which I got real confused because we are also watching The Crown. We've gotten to the season with Camilla, now Parker Bowles, but her maiden name was Shand. And I was like, wait, what? So, funny coincidence, I think.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Riki, what about for you? Was that a character you had been excited to see come back?
I did not. I guess I didn't really consider her character that great in her first appearance, so I wasn't waiting for her to come back. I was much more excited about the other character we're going to get to, or we can get to right now. I don't know.
Definitely. Did someone else show up and make a big deal?
Was that a thing here?
Well, I mean, so the scene you referenced in season 1, where Fennec is lying on the ground and then someone's boots walk up and you only see their boots. Fans quickly figured out that was Boba Fett at the time. Yeah. Just based on the color of the boots or something like that.
Well, also it's some shadowy figure on Tatooine. And since the 80s, everyone's been Boba Fett had to survive, right? He was wearing Mandalorian battle armor.
Yeah, and then we saw him stalking about, I think, in episode 1 when Mandalorian recovered his armor from the Marshal. And now, here he is. He showed, Slave 1 came flying down to this planet, and I got excited again because I am a fan, and I love stuff like that, that you recognize, and it just evokes so much emotion just seeing that ship.
It's the most iconic ship outside of the Enterprise, I feel. Or the Millennium Falcon or something.
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, certainly I had a toy of it when I was a kid. And I don't think I ever quite got into the Boba Fettness that so many others did. But just that ship meant so much to me, And so, I think seeing it was such a great way to bring his character in. And so what do we think of the way his character played out? Because I admit, this was not what I expected from his character. Him coming in and being, our hero kind of recognizing him as a fellow Mandalorian by the end, but also them teaming up. What was your take on this kind of the plot line that developed for us?
I'm a little confused, quite frankly. He's been on Tatooine for these last few years. So to go back, in Return of the Jedi, he got swallowed by the Sarlacc. And that's in canon the last we see of him. There's a lot of comic books and novels and stuff about him escaping and having more adventures after that. But in terms of movie canon, that was it. So now we are creating a new canon around Boba Fett. Supposedly he escaped from the Sarlacc. I'm sure he'll explain it to us. Lost his armor for whatever reason. They got picked up
we
by
don't
the
know how that
Jawas.
happened.
Right.
Yeah, and he's just been hanging out for who knows how long. I mean, the Sarlacc takes 1,000 years to digest someone, so we don't know if he got out immediately or if he just got out recently.
Right. Was he in there a couple weeks?
I mean, certainly his face is very scarred up, and we haven't seen his face. I think the last time we saw Boba Fett appear was as a kid in Clone Wars, where he does a couple of missions with pirates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've ever seen him as an adult outside of Empire and Return. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And A New Hope when they redid it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
When Han steps on Jabba's tail and calls him a wonderful human being.
The less said about that scene, the better. That may be one of my... I think, other than Han shooting first, that may be my least favorite addition to all of the original movies.
And he's being portrayed by Temuera Morrison, right? Who played Jango Fett and all the clones, because they're clones of Jango in the prequel trilogy. And Temuera ended up re-recording all 4 lines of Boba Fett dialogue in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Have you not? Did you not know that?
Oh, wait. I did not know that.
So
it was obviously someone else originally.
Yeah, and then because he's a clone, they're like, oh, he should probably sound the same. And he's got that New Zealand, I believe, accent.
Yeah, he's Maori, I believe, the indigenous people of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of my favorite things to mock about the re-release trilogies. Put Captain Solo on the Bobby.
Well, and I will say, I was very surprised because I was looking forward to what was going to happen with Boba Fett coming back. I was not very impressed by that actor when he appeared as Jango in the second movie, Attack of the Clones. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, the writing and directing made even someone like Natalie Portman, who I think of as a very good actress, real bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, who were you impressed by in that movie?
Ian McDermott.
There you go.
Okay.
But so I wasn't really... I went in with very low expectations. Mm-hmm. I really loved his acting performance. I thought he did a very good job of not being the character who I thought... Because I thought for sure he's going to be an antagonist. We've always only seen him as a bad guy. Someone who was... I mean, he's responsible for catching Han Solo, our hero. He works with the Empire. He was a big part of helping Luke get captured. And so I wasn't ready for him to kind of be just a workaday guy trying to get... that great line he says, I'm a simple man making his way through the galaxy as was my father before me.
Like my father before me, which is exactly the phrase in Return of the Jedi, right?
Oh, I hadn't even caught that. That's so cool.
Similarly, in the previous one, Ahsoka says, go to the planet Tython. There you will find, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Go to the planet Dagobah, go to the Dagobah system. There you will find here. But it's they're definitely very deliberately phrasing things exactly like things have been phrased before.
That's kind of cool. But yeah, I definitely was really impressed with his acting and with the role that he winds up playing. And granted, I'm a simple man making my way through the galaxy like my father. It leaves out, my father was responsible for the DNA that caused, 10 million soldiers in one of the craziest wars in galactic history.
Right.
Putting that aside.
Put that aside.
I really believed him as someone who had been active in this part of the war and maybe we're like, okay, that's not really the greatest thing that you're doing, but honestly, from the Mando's perspective, they're both bounty hunters. They're hunting down the people they have chits for.
Exactly.
And so I liked them teaming up much more than I thought I would have.
Mm-hmm. It seemed very logical to me. They both are wearing Mandalorian armor. They both are bounty hunters or were or whatever. And it does seem like Boba Fett has this sense of honor where he's like, no, this is the deal. We're gonna
Right.
It's not like this is the way, because I guess he's not exactly Mandalorian, right? But, I really liked it. I thought it made a lot of sense, actually.
Right. Well, as I understand it, like the whole thing about the way, and we'll talk about this more when we do a primer episode specifically on the Mandalorians. What we've learned so far is that that's only a one particular offshoot of Mandalorians, the Children of the Watch. Right. I think in some ways, Jango and Boba Fett might be closer to being like traditional from the planet Mandalorians than anyone else. More like Bo-Katan than our hero, the Mando.
Right, but he said he was a foundling, right? He was like, your father was a foundling.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that suggests that Jango Fett is not, I guess, racially or ethnically Mandalorian.
Right. Well, if that group is the only one that uses the term foundling. Have we heard the Mandalorians use the term foundling in Clone Wars or Rebels? I don't think so.
I don't either.
I don't think so.
It's all definitely very confusing as far as I can. I mean, I'm just getting into Rebels where there's more Mandalorian stuff, and I'm like, okay. Like, like trying to put it all together is pretty challenging. Right. I look forward to the primer episode.
For sure. To me, what I really liked about it is, I think I've said before, I wanted to see more of Mando wrestling with Bo-Katan and her compatriots, basically challenging everything he knew about his own identity. Mm-hmm. And I like that we got some of that here, and that in him recognizing, like, this guy takes off his helmet, he does things the ways I don't, but I recognize him as a fellow Mandalorian. I really want to see more of him figuring this out, and more of him coming to terms with, do you have to follow the way as I do in order to be a Mandalorian, or what does that mean?
Right. I feel like that's more likely to be a, like, multiple seasons long, very slow developing arc than, like, a this season, what's going on kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this show that feels like it is planning for next season or even several seasons ahead. And I think the Mandalorian identity crisis is something for the future where he may have to decide, right, between this group that he has grown up with and maybe the mainline Mandalorians at some point.
Right. I know that they are also planning a couple of new movies, and one theory that I'm working on is that a lot of this might well be stuff that that gets developed in later movies. I'm sorry, in the rest of the show. But it may also be that part of what they're doing is kind of planting the seeds for all the different plot lines that are going to happen. Like that we may get a movie about Bo-Katan and Ahsoka trying to like deal with what's happening in Mandalore with some involvement here. Or we might get a movie of, one of these other plot lines that's developing.
Right. Yeah, that seems possible. I'd watch anything with Ahsoka in it, honestly. So I'm down for that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the action in this episode, because there was a lot of it, and I was a little shocked at how Boba Fett easily defeated stormtroopers with what looks like a weed whacker.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a gaffy stick. It's one of the things that. It's a weapon used by the Tusken Raiders.
Oh, yeah.
Based on a Fijian weapon, the Totokia or something, I think. I thought it had really great choreography going on with that. Was Weed Whacker right there a reference to Machete?
No. I mean, that's just what it looked like.
Another Robert Rodriguez movie, Machete, the title character, Machete, he takes a Weed Whacker and like beats these guys up with it.
Such a good movie.
In hilarious fashion.
Well, this was kind of hilarious to me because I don't think I've ever seen stormtrooper armor get smashed open like that. Yeah. So it was very surprising, and I actually wondered out loud if Boba Fett himself had some kind of enhancements, like cybernetic enhancements.
Sure.
I mean, I did write in my notes that armor stops nothing.
Exactly.
It's like, what is it for?
If teddy bears with rocks can damage people in that armor, it's really not very good. I think it's paper mache.
And they get shot. They get shot in like the shoulder and go down.
Yeah, and they just go down,
and they're out for the rest of the fight, right? Like, if you are a soldier and you get shot in the shoulder. Like,
it's hard to say.
You would keep fighting, right? Like, that's your job. Or you would try to escape, but you wouldn't just, like, lie down for the rest of the fight.
Well, and so I want to hear you two talk more about the fight, because I'm not I enjoy fight scenes. They're definitely not my favorite. I thought there was very good parts of this. Frankly, I thought it went too long, but I think I'm very much in the minority there.
I think so.
But a couple of our fans actually wrote in and said that they were really looking forward to us talking about the fight scenes, especially because I know that someone pointed out that because a couple of people, Paul especially, I know, are martial artists. Riki, I think I remember you saying something about you studying martial arts at some point. I might be completely misremembering that. Okay, well, but for either of you then, what was it about this action scene that you liked so much?
Personally, I really like the variety. Like, one of my favorite action movies is The Avengers, and one of the reasons I like The Avengers so much is because out of the main characters, they all have very different fighting styles, right? And so here we had, three characters, right, sort of on one team against Infinity. Right. Manito with Kampa and Kino, and so it felt very much like that scene out of Desperado too.
Yes.
But, so Fennec is a sharpshooter, right? She's got a rifle or whether it's a sniper rifle exactly, I don't know all the model numbers or whatever. But, she's shooting people from a distance, and so is Boba Fett at first. And then they transition to more of a hand like blasters. Then there's a whole bunch of melee combat, and it actually manages to be similar to sort of the way Ahsoka was kind of like ducking in and out of the shadows. Here it's bright daylight, but there's all these boulders. It's very interesting terrain, right? And I think the terrain being interesting makes it way more compelling as a fight scene. You have the boulder thing. You have Fennec jumping backwards and shooting at people. You have her and Mando like back to back, and basically his armor repelling all of the shots while, and protecting her so she can shoot. And then you have Boba Fett sort of disappear, and I'm like, he's totally going to get his armor. And then he comes back in on his jetpack, and he's like, just using all the different things in his armor, all the different weaponry, and then, shooting at the ships and shooting them out of the sky with the rockets on his back. And it's the variety, right? It's not repetitive the way a lot of action sequences are. And I think you can have something go longer if you actually have that kind of variety, and it can remain compelling. Whereas, and the choreography just, I think, is so good. And it's not just the choreography, but it's like the camera choreography, right? It's like, what angle do I want to shoot this from? As opposed to just like, we're just going to show everything, or we're just going to have it be a confusing angle. It's like interesting angles, but not confusing interesting angles.
Yeah. Sorry, I was laughing because you mentioned the rocket. And the Mandalorian backpack rocket is one of my favorite things because of how dorky they look when they fire them. Because they have to like bend over.
They bend over at the waist.
It's like, why would you have to do that in the middle of a battle? Why would you design something like that?
Right. Yeah, it's
I think it's just a function of like that was the original costume design of Boba Fett. And like we watched a documentary on the Star Wars toys, and the original Boba Fett toy was recalled because that like rocket shot out and it was like a hazard.
Oh no!
Like, you'll put your eye out with that.
That's great. Seeing Boba Fett in the armor was awesome, and I'm glad they found a way to do it. I do have in my notes, Mando, remember the Jawas. Why the hell aren't you locking your ship?
Yeah.
He didn't even close the door.
Yeah, it was just a moment of like, okay. The fact that Boba Fett was able to leave the fight, go to the ship, find his armor, get back in time, is ridiculously contrived and dumb. But who cares? It looks great, Which, to me, is also incredibly Robert Rodriguez.
It's super Robert Rodriguez. I mean, that said, this was written by Jon Favreau, but we don't know how much Robert Rodriguez was like, oh, how about we do this? How about we do this? In terms of the action. But I also just love that, like, Boba Fett, like, comes back with his his armor on. He's awesome. And the troopers, like, one of the first times I've seen it, they're just like, fuck this. And they just flee. They're just gone,
Which is interesting because I think part of what they've established is I both hope this doesn't happen, but I imagine at some point it's going to have to. If Jin, our hero, and Boba Fett, go toe-to-toe, my money's probably on Boba Fett right now. I mean, I don't think we've seen Jin be that kind of effective as a hand-to-hand combatant. He's been pretty good, but I feel like what Boba Fett did was really above and beyond.
Boba Fett feels more skilled to me, for sure.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that the kind of end of that scene when the Razor Crest gets blown up, like, we're watching it and Lee's like, the tragedy! Because we've been joking about the episode title.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was a bad move because they've got a tracking device on that thing.
Exactly.
So,
why would you just, like, waste that?
If you're going to blow up one of the 2 ships parked there, why not blow up Slave 1 and force them to use the ship that you have a tracking device on?
That seems more logical.
Yeah, I did, though. I was definitely very surprised when I saw that. I thought that was a really nice... What you said about repetitive makes sense to me, especially in that if there's a fight scene in every episode, and at every episode our heroes basically get away okay, that will start to feel very repetitive. And so, I mean, this fight, obviously, part of the point was that new things are happening. And part of that's new characters are showing up, but also the fact that the Razor... I mean, and then we get to the real tragedy, but even before that, when the Razor Crest blew up, like, I was like, okay, here are the stakes. You know, something has fundamentally changed now. Exactly. This fight is going much worse, and I loved that moment. I thought it was great. Especially the whole thing of, like, just seeing the laser beam, like, coming down from space and wondering what's it aiming at.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things I enjoyed in this fight was the use of the terrain, like Paul was talking about, but specifically the boulder scene, where Fennec notices that some of the shots have loosened a boulder, and she does the... leans back against a rock and pushes her feet against it to push it down this hill, because that's what we like to see our protagonists do, right? Is find innovative ways to defeat the mass army that's coming at them. But then we also get the classic, the mass army is just bad at their job because they all get run over. They're like running away from it, like in a straight line instead of jumping to the side. I was like, jump to the side.
That poor idiot behind the cannon who thinks the cannon can, like, blow up the rock enough so that he's like, I'm going to keep trying to do this instead of jumping out of the way.
Right, exactly. It's like maybe move side to side instead of just...
It's such a classic trope, though, like in any kind of scene like this where it features a hill, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was well done, and especially that she had to go on the move because that, I mean... It was not going to destroy the rock enough to stop the cannon from getting run over, but clearly that big cannon was chipping away at the rocks. And I like that Fennec realizes that she can't just keep hiding behind the rock because they're going to blow it to smithereens eventually.
Right, exactly. And I like that the fact, you know, that their shots were doing something to the terrain. That it wasn't, she was like, oh, here's a boulder, let me push it over. It was like they shot it, it got loose, she's like, oh, that's loose, why don't I roll that at them?
Right. The one thing I wasn't really clear on is what's the connection between her and Boba Fett? Is that because Boba Fett saved her life?
That was what was implied, yeah. Because she showed, like, the cybernetic stomach implants. So she had been stabbed or shot in the episode.
Yeah.
Right.
So he found
like,
her
I don't understand how that works at all. But...
Yeah, look, sometimes your intestines get rebuilt in totally new ways.
Sure, yeah, hey, whatever works.
It's a little garbage disposal installed instead. So, anything else on the fight, or we don't talk about some of the other stuff that happened at the beginning and end of the episode?
Well, I have... Oh, no, go ahead.
I mean, like, continuation of the fight, but it kind of like in classic Voltron fashion, like, once your ground troops are defeated, you send in the big guns, right, in waves instead of just sending everything at once. Right after the stormtroopers retreat, we get the Dark Troopers for the first time in live action. I believe this was like something from video game lore originally. And I was confused because I previously thought and maybe said that Dark Troopers were like stormtroopers with force sensitivity, but doing some research, like that they've always been droids. And that's confusing to me because now that we've had the prequels, we've had droids. So it's like, why is the Empire kind of going backwards or doing that?
Right, because everyone's still using droids, although the Empire uses them much less. But yeah, I don't think they've really had battle droids in the Empire to that same extent. That being said, I think in this period of it being kind of in the middle of things, part of my sense is that Moff Gideon and the rest of the people rebuilding the Empire may just be kind of, picking up whatever loose scraps they can find. And so there may just still be some droids left over from the Clone Wars or something like that they uncovered or unpacked. And by the time the Empire becomes, the Empire writ large, they don't need that kind of thing.
But so here they're kind of just using whatever works, whatever they can find.
Yeah, but I will say that they are more advanced than our previous Roger friends.
Mm-hmm.
Even better, I would say, than the super battle droids. Because they, first off, they fly. They fly now.
Right.
They fly now?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, they seem more armored and possibly armed. We don't really see them in action. They fly down, they pick up Grogu, they fly away. But yeah, that's like a thing now that they're adding to the canon from other source material.
And certainly the fact that they are, in some of the source material, force sensitive, and that and that Moff Gideon is trying to make things force sensitive, I think there may be a connection there. Although, given all that they've because we know that those are droids, right? That was certainly my impression watching it.
It definitely seems that way.
Yeah.
But, maybe it's like half a person inside.
Maybe that's a connection with Fennec, showing that you can still be a person with a lot of cybernetic.
Right.
Because certainly I don't think we have any evidence that a non-sentient living being, or I should say that wrong, a droid is sentient, certainly, but that a mechanical being, I don't think, is connected to the Force by the lore that we have. So I think the idea of a droid that's Force sensitive would not make any sense.
Yeah, although I feel like it should, but,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a whole very interesting question that I don't know if we're here for that yet. But
definitely.
I found the question, have the Dark Troopers been engaged, such a weird question. Wouldn't you just be engage the Dark Troopers? Or it seemed very odd to me, that Moff Gideon didn't know yet whether it's does he delegate that much? It makes me feel like he's a little bit sort of out of touch as a, I don't know, Moff or as a commander or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
he may just give the order, do this, without micromanaging the whole thing.
Right, and I did think that they were fairly terrifying looking. It's those aren't going to be easy to stop. But it feels a little like Iron Legion, Age of Ultron, also.
Yeah,
just these basically, humanoid robots coming down from the sky and then going back up.
And given that we've established that Mando has, these horrible, traumatic memories of the droids that killed his family when he was young.
Yeah.
I think if those become a regular feature, we're definitely going to, if Mando has to go up against them in some way, that he's going to have to really overcome some of that fear and terror from his past.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So backing up, let's get to the tragedy, but I think we should set the tone for that a bit first. At the beginning, we have just this very small little moment that's just a few minutes, but of Mando playing with Grogu, Baby Yoda, and not teaching him the Force, but encouraging him to use his Force abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I found that scene really touching. I really liked it as a, seeing Grogu grow, seeing Mando start to more understand it, but also you could tell, and again, this is just the incredible acting of Pablo Pascal.
Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal, thank you. The incredible acting of Pedro Pascal that, without barely saying anything, I got such a strong sense that he is really not looking forward to having to hand this kid over and not be part of Grogu's life anymore going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of funny kind of memes going around about what The Mandalorian is as a show, and one of them is that it's a show about a single father going around trying to find healthcare or childcare for his son.
I like that one a lot.
And so, yeah, getting these scenes like that is part of what people love about this show. Like, it's a very small part in the scheme of things, but people love that. And then, the other thing they say is that he's just like a side character in this intergalactic struggle, and he like just kind of keeps showing up and doing things, and maybe like kind of Homer Simpsoning and accidentally saving the day.
Yeah. Well, it was the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern point I made last episode.
Yeah.
We're getting to see the big events, but through his eyes, which I'm loving.
Yeah, I thought it was a great moment at the beginning. It really sets the stakes, like why we care when Grogu gets kidnapped. Also, I felt like, when he's talking to him about, I've got to take you back to your people so you can, learn this Jedi stuff. Like, it seems like, well, does Grogu necessarily want to or need to learn more Jedi stuff? Like, he can, right? But it's, does he have to go off with the Jedi? Like, I think he doesn't. And, I mean, that's some of the, sort of the question about the Jedi themselves in the original, not the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and before then, like the actual Jedi Order, when it was a whole order and everything. Like, were they basically going around kidnapping kids and turning them into Jedi? Yes. Or they're like, oh, right? So, like, there's an extent to which it's like, maybe Grogu should just be a kid who, okay, yeah, he should learn to some extent how to control his powers, because otherwise he might accidentally do a bunch of bad stuff, but at the same time, it's like, that doesn't necessarily have to define him, right? I mean, it's the most obvious thing somebody will notice after the fact that he's very small and green and adorable, but like, that doesn't have to be the sum total. I mean, like, maybe this is a show where at the end, like, Mando and Grogu just go live on Dagobah and chill, like, and probably eat frogs whole or something. I don't know. But
no, they open a macaron shop.
Yes, better. Much better.
I think you're both making a really good point there about the choice that he needs to make. And I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of last episode, was Ahsoka really saying that. And I think it's because of this, because Ahsoka has, at this point, incredibly mixed feelings about the Jedi. Mm-hmm. And so saying that, like, Grogu will have to choose, and that you can introduce him to another Jedi to let him choose, but he has to make that choice.
Yeah.
It does. So we saw Grogu get up on that rock, and like the big light show happened, and obviously there was an energy thing enough to push Mando back, which he took a couple of tries for him to learn that, but he did seem to eventually learn that. But we didn't have anything happen based on that. What do you think was going on there? And are we going to see someone answer that call late, or do we think that's just because there's no one listening to the call anymore? What was going on there?
Well, I think someone has to come, but the question is who, right? Like, we have a very limited cast of possible Jedi or Force-sensitive survivors at this point, and we know some who just can't show up logistically, right? Like, Luke Skywalker cannot show up in the series. It just wouldn't make any sense. Maybe they'll introduce a new character, and I was thinking about this. I think if they do introduce a new character, I think it would be like a Dark Jedi or a Sith, rather than one of the light side folks.
So this is going to be a spoiler for the end of Clone, which Paul has not yet seen. He's going to take a quick break. What if it's Ezra? I'm talking about Ezra Bridger, who is a Jedi character who's introduced in the TV show Rebels. And as we talked about in our primer on Thrawn, he disappears at the end of Rebels deep into hyperspace with Grand Admiral Thrawn because they're taken away by these space whales. And if it sounds crazy, I promise you it's very well done in the story. But so we know that if Thrawn is possibly back, do you think it's possible that Ezra's also back, and that maybe that's the person who's going to get summoned by this?
I'd consider that too, and it felt like too much. I think Ahsoka is the light side Force user we get in the show, and I just don't want there to be too much going on, and that's why I theorized that it could be a new dark side character. I
think that does make sense. I think Ezra's the only one I can think of other than Luke, and I think in both cases it would sort of be too big for the story that we're trying to have, as well as just, already I love the character of Ezra, I love the character of Kanan, but it already pushed the credit. A lot of the things in Rebels push the credibility of Luke is supposed to show up and no one's ever seen this for so long. Given that we know that most of the early rebellion fighters have been fighting alongside Ezra for the last how many years before Luke shows up. So yeah, I from a canonical perspective, I would rather they not keep pushing that, but I think it's one option that they might explore doing. Let me bring back Paul now.
Bring Paul back in. We can talk about the dark side some more, because I think someone previously suggested that he could make contact with Snoke and or Palpatine, right? Like a pre-Snoke. I don't know.
So that's certainly one option. Riki, though, you're saying that you think it might be someone dark side connected who shows up. What are you going for in that regard?
Well, there's some people who suggested that this could, I think it was you, Matthew, that it could tie into the postquels, and we might see like a Snoke type character introduced, which is possible, but I just don't like that character. Period.
Yeah.
Or at least the way he was used. Maybe it would be better if we got a little more expanded knowledge about him. But I think just like a new character is fine. Like design some new dark character with a cape, because they all seem to love capes. Gideon looks like as much of a Darth Vader fanboy as Kylo Ren, right?
yes, he does.
He's got the cape. He's even got like a chest piece with some lights on it. So I'm like, Moff Gideon, when are you going to get yourself a fancy mask?
I mean, if you're like, an Empire person, right? Or like a dark side person, I mean, who are you going to look up to more than Darth Vader? Like, what, you're going to try and be like Sidious? Be like, can I get some more wrinkles? Can you put some more wrinkles on me? Like, it seems like the look.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. And I think, Riki, you captured it perfectly as to what I would want. I like the idea that what we're seeing here plants the seeds of what will become the First Order, and that early people who are trying to rebuild the Empire, futzing around with the Force, may in some way, like, again, set the seeds that lead to Snoke or clone Palpatine or whatever it is. I don't want to see them on screen, though. But
if you want a real tragedy, what if Palpatine's forces at the end of the show get their hands on Grogu, and he is somehow like becomes Snoke or something, or like a clone.
Grogu becomes Snoke.
Yeah, or like genetic material is used to create Snoke.
Yeah, that's my deepest fear, and like I'm just glad Scott Buck isn't directing the show, because that would definitely be how it ended. Like,
well, I think if the genetic material of Grogu is used and that somehow leads to Snoke, that to me isn't the worst thing. The idea of the cutest creature ever since an Ewok, and if not more so, becoming Snoke by turning to the dark side is just not a story I'm ready to watch. I don't know, like, I can't.
Your heart can't handle that.
Yeah.
So there is another option. There's a video game called Jedi Fallen Order that took place in the pre-Yavin days, like maybe the same time around Rebels, maybe a little earlier than that. And it features a Jedi who survives the Purge, named, I think, Seer. And then she trains a young Force-sensitive person. Actually, he was a Padawan during the Purge who escaped. And then she ends up training him. He's the main character of the video game, Cal Kestis. And I'm pretty sure that this video game came out last year, is considered canon. And so there is speculation of like finding ways to bring these characters into a movie or a TV show.
I can see that. The other possibility here is that, now we know that Moff Gideon was already tracking their ship, so that's certainly a big part of how Moff Gideon found them. But Moff Gideon has also been very interested in matters having to do with the Force. And I don't know enough about what's supposed to happen on Tython to know, could a non-Jedi still kind of like monitor that radio channel, to use a terrible metaphor, like to be aware of if something's happening on Tython, or would it only really be an actual Jedi or an actual Force user who would get the signal?
It seemed like a Force signal because it was not no mechanical device.
Right.
Yeah, I concur. It felt to me like something that somebody who is Force sensitive might have a sense about it, right?
Right.
Like Ahsoka might be like, "Oh, okay, they got there."
Right.
Right. And somebody else might hear the call, basically. But that, you're not going to have like a tracking, a thing that's like, "Oh, we're getting some, some chatter on the Tython channel."
Yeah. Which does lead to me what is becoming my biggest concern about all the Grogu storyline. And maybe you all can talk me down on this cliff, or maybe you're in the same feeling. We talked before that one of the things we liked about this show so much, or at least that I liked about the show so much, is that it's about events that are happening below the radar screen. Why would Luke care that, why would Luke or Leia or Han or Mon Mothma, any of the people putting together the New Republic, why would they care about what one lone bounty hunter is doing and these little squabbles against little groups of the Empire, etc.? But we now have both a former Jedi and now a member of the New Republic in the scene with Cara Dune, both of whom are becoming aware of the existence of Grogu and the importance of the story that's happening and the idea that the Empire does. And I feel like at some point, I agree with you, I don't want Luke or Leia or any of them to show up, but I do feel like at some point I'm going to need someone to tell me, what is Luke actually doing in terms of looking for Force-sensitive people? And is he in any way aware of what's happening with Grogu, or does he become aware of it? And if not, why not? Is that something that's becoming more of an issue for either of you guys, or is this just my own little paranoid flight of fancy story-wise?
For me, I feel like... So I don't quite share the same opinion. After, in terms of Luke, like after seeing... Sebastian Stan next to a young Mark Hamill. I'm like, okay, you can have Luke show up. It's not his story, right. So you have to be very careful in terms of how that character or Leia can appear, right? That it doesn't. It's difficult when you're taking a character who's like so large,
right, and
then putting them in something else as like a cameo. I think, I think we felt that with Ahsoka as well, right? Where it was like, I love Ahsoka being on screen. I love her being in the story. But it also feels a little bit like, where'd she go? Like, why isn't she in all the episodes? And, they kind of had sort of an explanation for that. But I think up until this point, it's made plenty of sense that just not a lot of people know about Grogu, right? Some people do, but not a lot. And not a lot of people know about the remnants of the Empire, that they are as coordinated and as strong as they are right now, right? And Ahsoka's clearly tracking down Thrawn, right? And I think most people don't know about Gideon. But now they do.
Right.
Now they at least know about Gideon, right? And they know that he's trying to capture a Force user. And, like, yes, it seems like that's something that the New Republic would definitely be interested in. But Dune is, like, just barely in the New Republic. Like, she just joined, right? So, like, does Mando say, hey, maybe don't tell anyone anything about Grogu, just help me out here? It's a little sort of like, I don't know, but... At the same time, I can kind of buy it, and I can certainly buy that up until this point, it's gone this way, but I do feel like the story is heading on a track that it will be very difficult to not have it become like an Empire versus the New Republic on a big stage kind of thing.
Yeah, it is getting a little too big, I agree, and too connected. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's going to keep going in that direction and just become that show, which would feel a little disappointing. I think I've enjoyed the side questy, like out in the Outer Rim, like doing important stuff, but not of galactic historical importance. But yeah, we're heading towards there. Like, Gideon's got too much stuff going on at this point, especially if he is working for or with Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Right.
No matter what, like, Thrawn is a galactic level threat. whatever he's been up to.
And I think that's kind of what I'm thinking is, maybe you're right, Paul, and maybe the Stan Sebastian as Luke showing up would work. I have my serious doubts, but possibly. And again, maybe that's leading to some other movie, although I really don't want more Luke in new movies. I want new characters, new content. I think I just want some acknowledgement in the universe. It could be something as simple as Cara Dune, like, perking up and saying, oh, yeah, actually we were given a directive to, if we ever hear about any Force-sensitive, stuff, to let people know. And then Mando's like, no, don't tell anybody, Right. Or her saying, like, yeah, I'm going to join you because, like, I've been told this is a big thing. Or, like, we heard from, one of the people back on Coruscant that they're very interested in this. Like, or even just, yeah, the folks in Coruscant say to, like, check it out if I can, but they're so busy with other stuff. Like, just some acknowledgement that the numerous Force users we now are finding running around is the kind of thing that once that information gets plugged into the more, I just want to know what the hell Luke is doing at this time, And it kind of goes back to the thing I think that has been a frustration to me throughout this is we don't have any. It's the same problem I had about the time after the Clone Wars before the original movies. We don't have any understanding of who knows what, Is Luke Skywalker a hero throughout the galaxy? Has no one ever heard of him? Is Anakin, who? And I think on the one hand, I would have thought that no one knows anything until I saw that, I think, Riki, you pointed this out, in the tiny little town that is off the map because everyone's forgotten about it in Tatooine, even they watched the second Death Star blow up, So
yeah.
Some level of history keeping is happening here. So not a huge deal, but I definitely am curious to see where they go with that. But beyond that, what are your... Now, Moff Gideon has Grogu in his power and is threatening him with the Darksaber and making sure he's not going to put an eye out, which I thought was a hilariously funny line. Where do you think we're going to go with this in the last couple episodes we have this season?
I think we're going to go to a showdown. So at the end of this episode, they were talking about breaking someone out of prison, right?
Yeah.
What was that character? Because I just kind of missed it.
I think that's the Bill Burr character or something.
It's Mayfield. He was one of the people involved in the...
Mayfield.
Yeah.
The prison
break,
break,
the whole sentence
right?
Again. Yeah.
I mean, he's some sort of criminal, right? Who knows how to get in and out of places and knows things about different facilities or whatever. And so he's someone that Mando thinks he needs to have on his team for doing something like this.
Right.
He already has Fennec and Boba Fett, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of these, like, what I kind of anticipate is we get a showdown between, the sort of plucky team of, Mando and company against Moff Gideon and whoever else. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's when, like, a Jedi shows up or a Dark Jedi or whatever. Somebody who answered the call and can sense where Grogu is. Right, I think that would be sort of plausible.
I can see that.
Kind of in the sort of like Luke, Leia, like she's like, oh, we have to go back. Something along those lines. And I feel like it's going to be more than just a like one side versus the other side kind of rescue mission. Mm-hmm. And I hope it goes well.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
I can certainly see. Maybe that there are some folks from the New Republic who are like, oh, cool, Grogu. Yes, we need to take that new Force user back to Coruscant and, introduce him to Luke or whatever in all the ways that, and Mando's like, no, F this. Me and my kid are going to go off and do our own thing because it sounds horrible.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I also kind of, I want to watch Appa blow up a TIE fighter. Like, I really just want scene so much.
No, that has to happen.
For anyone who hasn't seen,
we need that.
What's the actor's name?
Paul Sun-Hyun Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Paul Sun-Hyun Lee. Jeez, I always do that because he plays Mr. Kim.
Yeah.
On Kim's Convenience.
Fantastic show. But yeah, he's been the X-Wing traffic cop that we've seen a couple times. So it would be fun to see him show up at the ending. I'm definitely very worried.
Carson.
I didn't think that Gideon was actually going to get his hands on Grogu. And I feel like we've established that Grogu doesn't quite have the Force power to fight his way out. Like, he can smash the two soldiers together in what was a hilarious scene. But it feels like at this point, Gideon is going to have the genetic material that he wants. And I'm really curious and kind of nervous to see where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like he's going to get that, and Grogu is going to have to somehow survive, because otherwise
the show's over.
I don't want to watch the show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The fans will
like
riot.
just no, it's just like you just can't do that. But yeah, I do feel like the New Republic, Captain Carson Teva, and Cara Dune are going to get involved, and I mean, I don't know. We'll see how that happens, but I think pretty clearly they're going to have, because they got some material out of him, right? Mm-hmm. Before, it sounded like, and they'll probably get some more. And we were talking about whether the show could work as, without Grogu in it, and I was like, no. I mean, it can't work for me. Yeah. At this point, he's been in every single episode, right? Barely in the first episode of the show, of season 1, but he's been in every episode besides that, and the Empire, remnants of the Empire, had him for like an episode or so, and I figured at some point he would probably get captured, or he would be like left with the Jedi for a couple episodes, and you'd see kind of the sort of like Dagobah type scenes that are cut back and forth kind of thing. But I mean, I just feel like you can't take that character out of the show and have it still be the show that I want to watch anymore.
Yeah, it turns out like it's called The Mandalorian, but it's really, like I was saying, some people love it for the dad drama, and that's become what the show is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because Mando is a character who, he's a warrior. Weapons are a part of his religion. We never see his face. He's always in armor. Mm-hmm. I feel like his connection to Grogu really humanizes him in a way that is so needed. Provides that like the cute little scenes of him like playing with his son, basically for all intents and purposes, and teaching him, encouraging him to use the Force powers. You need that to back up all the him as a warrior stuff, and without that, I'm not sure where it would go.
Yeah, and so touching at the end of this episode, even though it's incomprehensible that it would survive, A, and B, that he would be able to find it, but when he finds the silver sphere that Grogu loves playing with, it's just like, oh no, my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have a control ball made of Beskar or something, right? Like, I was like, oh, that thing was Beskar.
The only part of the ship that's made out of Beskar.
Exactly.
Well, so speaking
he had
of
the
which,
spear too, yeah.
Since we basically now have Chekhov's Beskar spear, who is that spear going to kill? Because I figure that spear has to be used to kill someone significant.
Right.
Is it Moff Gideon? I like the character enough that I'm not sure I want to lose him this season, but I feel like that spear has to have a very significant role in the finale somehow.
I think it's Gideon.
Yeah.
I think so too.
The way I'm in my head guessing how this season ends is we're going to get some buildup of, Mandalorian's 11, where he goes around collecting his crew again, like breaking this guy out of prison.
Right.
You got to call up Bo-Katan, call up Ahsoka. They're doing their things, but if you tell Ahsoka, Gideon got Grogu, I think she's got to come, right? And if you tell Bo-Katan, I'm fighting Gideon, she'll be like, oh, wait, you're fighting Gideon? Hang on.
And he's got the Darksaber. That should be yours.
Yeah.
Wait, do they know all that, though?
No one ever
Gideon's
talks
alive
to each
and
other.
that he has the Darksaber?
I don't think they talk. No, because I don't think any of them know.
No, they know.
They thought he died, right, in the TIE fighter? They do know, but how do they know?
In the Siege, they had that video recording where the scientist was reporting to Gideon. And they're like, oh, he's dead. Like, no, this was 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Right.
But he doesn't know about the Darksaber. Or, like, even necessarily what it is, right?
No, I think that's correct.
Because did he only use it to break out of the TIE fighter?
Yes.
Okay.
And he thought he died in the TIE fighter, so obviously
he didn't see that. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Grogu knows.
Yeah.
Grogu knows, yeah.
A lot of mystery there.
That would be the best first words. Darksaber.
Yeah. So we do try to keep the episode, the review episode, about as long as the actual episode of the show. We've now we've now passed the double it mark. So I want to start wrapping up. Is there any other kind of last things though, folks want to comment on?
I got a thing. I got a correction, Matthew, that I need to make.
Okay.
You keep mentioning Coruscant, which it was the capital of the Empire, it was the capital of the Old Republic. Apparently, and this came up in the episode The Siege, the protocol droid in that school was talking about the planet Chandrila as the capital of the New Republic.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Which is the home planet of Mon Mothma. So that makes sense if she was the first head of state that they would put the government there.
I know that in The Force Awakens, we see an entire star system be blown up by the planet killer. Is that the one that it is, or is it... Because I know it's not Coruscant, and there's some other planet that gets blown up. I wonder if it's that same one.
I do not believe that they name the planet or the star system that is destroyed.
Don't they say like the core systems or something? Like
it's like that laser was like a sentient laser that broke apart at the end and like destroyed several things.
Yeah, not my favorite part of the Star Wars universe.
We have missiles now with MIRVs, multiple re-entry vehicles at the top of our missiles, so it's possible. But yeah, not that I generally try to question the science of Star Wars technology, but that did seem a little strange for sure.
Well, for me, it was just that they wanted to like hand wave, like get rid of the New Republic, which I was like, really? Like, or the, I don't know. Anyway,
we'll get to a discussion of those movies for sure. Paul, what was your thing?
So I had two things. Both of one which I thought made some sense, but was a little frustrating, and the other one which was kind of my biggest kind of caveat to really loving this episode. Like, pick up your jetpack.
Yes.
Like, you have to get to the top of the hill as fast as you can. Pick up your jetpack. Like, what are you doing? It was just absurd not doing it. Like, give me something better than that if you need to take the jetpack out of the rotation, basically. Like, okay, it's out of fuel or whatever. Like, it was just having him like be like, yeah, exactly. It was just like, I was like, oh, come on. Like, I understand this episode works better without him having a jetpack. I get it,
right,
and I can appreciate that. But give me a better reason that he doesn't have it than that he put it down and was like, I'll get it later. That was the one thing that like really bothered me. And, them then being able to capture Grogu basically because of that is like, nothing better happened to that child.
Yeah.
Or like, that's my number one rule. If you do something that really is contrived and doesn't make any sense, if it's funny and it leads to this or this showdown, fine. Okay, we'll allow it. But like, if it leads to like the death or like something really horrible happening to a character I care about, we're done.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then the other one was like Mando trying to get Grogu to stop doing his Force thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, say his name. Like, first it's like talking to someone while they're meditating always works, right? But like, then he was just like, come on, kid, we gotta go. It's like, say Grogu. Mm-hmm. Like, you already had this moment earlier where he responded to you when you said Grogu in a way that he hadn't responded earlier, right? So like, use his name, and maybe it still wouldn't work because he's super in a trance and he's whatever's going on. And then like the timing of Grogu being done with this thing felt like contrived and annoying. It was like just perfectly timed for, Mando to have just left him and gone down to try and fight against the stormtroopers. So there was some contrivances that I found very frustrating during the episode, given the fact that they didn't kill anyone off. Okay, they blew up the Razor Crest, fine. Mm-hmm. And that didn't feel contrived because like, yeah, okay, lasers from space. Okay, you can blow up a ship. You've got I guess it's it's a light cruiser, right? It's not like a Star Destroyer, but still, I'll buy it. That's fine. But like, you're not allowed to kill off any characters if you have these kind of contrivances. Those are the rules. I just gotta lay them out.
I appreciate you laying out those rules for us. Yeah. I will. Go ahead, Riki.
Well, I was just going to comment on the light cruiser. I believe is the kind of the same model that they introduced and utilized a lot of the time in Rebels, right?
Yeah.
Because a Star Destroyer is too big.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. There's a lot of things that I've been watching Rebels while watching season 2, of Mandalorian, and there's the Blurg that show up, I think, for the first time there. I don't remember them being in Clone Wars.
They actually
and they're
appear
obviously in season
on
1
screen
of Mando,
in the revised version of A New Hope, but they're never like mentioned or discussed at all.
Okay, so they're on Tatooine, but like it just feels like there's a lot of continuity between Rebels and Mandalorian, and I really enjoy that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think Mandalorian is very clearly. I mean, it's Dave Filoni is very involved, and it's very much paying homage to both Clone Wars and Rebels. The one thing I will say,
paying homage to the series that he made himself.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I will also say about The Hill, and granted, I'm just sort of at the end of my rope with the side questiness of it, and thank God this episode wasn't. But when they showed him like saying, "Oh, I can't land at the top of the hill, and have to land at the bottom," I wrote in my notes, "I will be so pissed if this entire episode is him getting up the hill." Like, because I just figured like Boba would stop him or someone else would happen. Like that, the whole episode would just be about his, and at the very end of the episode would be like putting Grogu on that rock, and I just didn't want that. Right. And so when they just next scene they're at the top of the rock, I was like, yes, perfect.
Right. You're like, okay, cool,
awesome. So
yeah. So
thanks, folks. I know we had a lot to say. Fans, we would love to hear from you, and I'm going to say a word about that in a moment. But first of all, Paul, I know you've been working on a new project. You want to tell folks about?
Yeah, I'm basically doing a bunch of streaming and some videos, mostly about poker and chess at the moment, some language stuff, and all kind of centered around sort of learning, teaching ourselves things, and all of those are under my sort of pseudonym Zen Madman, and you can find me on Twitch and YouTube under those aliases, or that one alias, I guess. Alii, I wanted to say, but I don't think that's a word.
Awesome. Yeah, no, they're definitely a lot of fun to check out. Paul's got a lot of great theories about how we learn, and has been talking a lot about that in terms of both how we learn learning chess and learning poker, but also some great lessons for other things. He's had some fantastic guests on, especially for some of the chess videos. I would definitely check that out. One of them.
Matthew's been my only guest so
exactly. far. Riki, what about yourself? Are there ways folks can check out what you're up to these days?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MTGRikipedia, where I tweet about Magic the Gathering, Pokemon Go, Star Wars, and racism, I guess.
Yeah.
The topics I cover.
Cool. So great. Thank you both. And to our fans, we'd love to know what you thought. Is this one of your favorite episodes? What did you want out of getting Boba back, and how did this match that? How excited were you to have Fennec back? Some of the other characters we got introduced to. What do you think is going to happen with Grogu? What do you think about our theories? And are we totally wrong? All the ways to contact us, if you go to strandedpanda.com and then click on Star Wars Universe Podcast, you can find everything there. As we mentioned, we've also just put out an episode that's a primer on Grand Admiral Thrawn. A lot of cool things to talk about there. Riki and I did that to kind of bring you up to speed on why is it that so many of us went utterly crazy when we heard that name get mentioned. We're going to be doing another one soon about Ahsoka and the Mandalorian history. Those might be the same episode. They might be separate ones because they're very intertwined, but we may also separate them some. So a lot of great things. And honestly, the best thing you can do to help us right now is write us a review. The more reviews we get, the higher we show up in people's search engines, the more people get to join this conversation, start listening to this podcast, and start getting a part of all of it. So please leave a review for us. 5 stars, I hope. But if not, certainly let us know what we can do to be better. Thank you so much to Paul and Riki, and on behalf of myself and all of them, thank you all. Have a great day.